You've been like...
I did on purpose. Last week we finished up James chapter 3. We got 2 chapters to go. Today we'll probably get through half of chapter 4. And again, I keep saying this, but man, this book has been like if you want a book to study on what it means to not have strife in your life, to not have strife in relationships, this is the book. Because honestly, there's so many things that the book talks about from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 5 that it sometimes feels like it's restating the things that were said before, but I think honestly it's because of how important it is to know these things and for these things to get down into our heart. So last week we were obviously talking about wisdom that's from above and how it said, Jesus said that wisdom shall be known by her children. And the example that was given there was that they were talking about John the Baptist and saying things about him, and they were talking about Jesus and saying evil things about him, and he was making the point of don't look at what people say, look at the fruit. And so obviously for John the Baptist and Jesus, the fruit, the wisdom that they were operating in, it proved who they were. It proved that God was working through them, and it wasn't just like this earthly wisdom of like I'm gonna say things to you that just sound really intelligent and sound really good, because at the end of the day, that's not what speaks louder than words. Actions speak louder than words. And so Jesus was making that point. He's like, they can say whatever they want about me and about John, but at the end of the day, wisdom is known by her children. It's the fruit of what we're doing that you should be looking at. And even at the end of chapter 3, it said, wisdom that is from above is first pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy, and good fruits. So wisdom is full of good fruits. If somebody is telling you that they're giving you advice, or that there's somebody that you should listen to, like, listen to me, I know better, the truth is the thing that you should do is look at their life. And I think we said that last week. If somebody's giving you marital advice, what does their marriage look like? Are they somebody who has a good marriage? Are they somebody who has been through some kind of adversity and they have overcome challenges and now they're speaking to you from a place of victory? Then you know what? That's somebody you should listen to. If you're struggling with finances and somebody is giving you advice, what's their financial status like? Are they somebody who seem to make really good financial decisions? What are you doing in those situations? You're looking at the fruit of their life. And that's what the wisdom that's from above, that's one of the aspects that it's talking about, is look at the good fruits that those people are producing, and that's what we focus on more than just the things that they say, because you're going to come across people all the time who will talk and they will sound intelligent and it'll sound right, everything that they say, but then something doesn't sit right with you because when you look at their life, it doesn't match up with what they're saying. Well, guess what? That person isn't in a place where they should be giving you advice because they haven't figured it out for themselves. And so do you want to follow somebody's advice who isn't working that out in their own life? Right? No, the truth is you don't want that. So we were just talking about wisdom, and obviously the chapter was talking about the tongue. And again, here James is starting again with pride and with strife. And so that's why I said, like, when you go through the book, you're gonna come across a lot of topics that are covered over and over again. But I think that James is just hitting them from different angles. So in chapter 4, he starts out again and talking about strife, but he's relating it to our pride. And a lot of times we think that we don't struggle with pride, like we don't have problems with pride, but if you really examine your life, I can promise you this: the only reason why we get into an argument with somebody is because they said something that we don't like. And that's what it boils down to. You argue with somebody because they said something you don't like. It did what? It offended you. you shouldn't be offended if you're somebody who doesn't struggle with pride. You should be able to just swallow what they said and not care, because at the end of the day, as believers, we're commanded to be pleasing to God and not to please people and to not please ourselves. So if somebody is saying something and that just sets us off, that means there's something inside of us that got offended by what they said. And really that's coming back to we're still caring too much about what we think about a specific topic, or we think about ourselves. And that when you look at it, that's pride. Jesus said in Luke chapter 9, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. You can't follow Jesus if you haven't first denied yourself. In other words, don't regard your life as anything. Be willing to just do whatever God is asking you to do. Denying yourself literally means that you're swallowing your pride. Like, you get yourself out of the way, and now because you're out of the way, now God can speak directly to you, and He can get you to do the things that He wants you to do. If you're in the way, you're never going to hear God. Every time, you're not going to be able to follow after Him. Every time you want to follow after Him, you get in the way of that. And that's why Jesus said that. If anybody wants to come after me, if you want to be my follower, the first thing you got to do is you have to deny yourself. And that seems like a simple statement, but it's obviously something that's really hard for us, because there's so many cares and so many pleasures in life that we want to go after, so many things that we want to accomplish. And I'm making the emphasis on we, because a lot of times it's about what we want to do, and when we're focused on what we want to do, we're not focusing on Him. It's a very simple way of looking at it. If you're focused on this cup, I can't be focused on something else, right? So whatever I'm focusing on, that's what I'm giving all of my attention to. That's where my thoughts are. And eventually, that's where my heart is going to be, because I'm focusing on that. So if we go through life only focusing on the things that we want to do, the things that we want to accomplish, we can't be focused on the things that God's asking us to do, because it's just not possible. You can't focus on two things at the same time. That's why James said at the beginning, don't be double-minded. If you're going to be double-minded, don't expect that you receive anything from God. Why? Because you just can't do it. You can't focus on two things at once. We talk about multitasking, so I'm not talking about multitasking, but I'm saying if you are seeking to do the things that you want in life, you cannot seek the things that God is asking you to do. It's just not possible. You can't focus on two things at the same time. So he starts out in chapter 4, and I'm going to read it in the Passion Translation. I don't normally go to the Passion Translation, but I just feel like it helps a little bit more to help us understand what's being said. Starting in verse 1, what is the cause of your conflicts and quarrels with each other? Again, he's talking about strife. Doesn't the battle begin inside of you as you fight to have your own way and to fulfill your own desires? In the New King James, it says, do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? That word pleasure is the same word that they use when they're talking about the sower scattering seed, and that the cares of this life and the pleasures of this life choke out the seeds that are planted. So it's not talking about it in just a specific way. It's just talking about whatever pleasures that we are desiring. Those a lot of times are what generate the quarrels and the fights and the wars that we fight, the strife that we have. And so again, he's talking about pride and being self-centered. So if you're dealing with an argument, you're getting into an argument, you have to understand that it's coming from a place of there's something that you regard and that you feel like you should fight for. And really, that's not humility. Yes, you should defend yourself, and you should defend God when you're talking to people. But at the end of the day, there should never be something other than God that's worth fighting for. Like, you should be able to yield at all times. The whole purpose of two becoming one, even in a relationship, is that you both give of yourself, and you seek to make the other person happy, and they seek to make you happy. Like at the end of the day, that's one of the keys to having a successful relationship, is that you're not out to serve your own interests. You're out to try to be pleasing and to be a servant to the other person, and they are out to do the same for you. So in Proverbs, there's a lot of verses that talk about this, but I just want to read a few of them that's talking about pride. Just because it really kind of helps to hit this home. Proverbs 13:10 says, "By pride comes nothing but strife." By pride comes nothing but strife. So if strife is happening, it comes because of pride. Proverbs 16 says, "Everyone proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord." And we're going to read here in chapter 4 that it says God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. So another thing to focus on is that when we are operating in pride, when we are trying to seek after the things that we want, when we're allowing ourselves to get into strife, we have to understand that we're getting in opposition to God. Because the Bible is very clear. He resists the proud. He's not going to give you anything. If your heart is not right, it's not where it should be, you're not going to get anything from him. It's very clear. Pride goes before destruction. In Proverbs 22, it says, "By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life." The opposite of pride is being humble. And that's not easy for us to do, and I'm saying that firsthand. I can give an example. Tuesday night we were playing basketball, and Jorge's making a face because he was there with me. We're playing basketball, and there's 3 courts, and we've got a game going on, and these kids that are obviously on summer break are there, and a ball rolls into our court. Well, you got to stop the game because it's just not safe for us to keep playing. Someone can land on the ball. We stop the game. We hand the ball back. This happens like 3 times. Like just over and over and over again. So I turn and I say, "Hey guys, can you guys, if you shoot a shot and you see that you missed, can you just be a little bit quicker about coming to get the ball so it doesn't come onto our court and we have to keep stopping our game?" And so again, we get back to playing, and the ball comes again. And so I'm like, "Come on, guys." I give the ball back, and right as we're about to start playing again, the ball rolls. And at this point, I turn back, and I see some kids who are over on the bleachers. They put their heads down, and they're laughing. And I'm talking about, when I say kids, I'm talking about like 16 to 18. Like they're in that age range. And I don't, like I said some stuff that I shouldn't have, and it made me angry. And I yelled at the kids, and my kids were there, and I had to apologize to them, because the truth is yes, it's a situation where they're being nasty little punks, right? But at the end of the day, it shouldn't bother me that much that I have to now get into an argument with them. And they didn't even have ears to hear anything that I said anyways, because I was nice the first time when I asked them to get the rebound, and they just saw that as an opportunity to do it again. And the reason why I'm using that example is I cared too much about us playing and being right, and I wasn't able to see that I, in that moment, was a terrible example to my sons. Because Liam and Jack were there, and I had to repeatedly for the rest of the night be like, "Hey guys, that's not how we act. Like, that's not what we're supposed to do. You should be able to let things go." And so it was a place of pride. Like I wasn't being a humble person and just being like, whatever, I'm going to ignore it and let it go. I thought it was something that I needed to fight for, when in reality, all it did was open me up to be a terrible example to my sons. And they're boys, and especially Liam, he's at that age as a teenager where he's trying to learn how to harness his emotions, how to control his emotions, and so he has a tendency to want to be angry about situations. So we have been working a lot with him about not being angry, and here I am being an awful example, the complete opposite of everything that I had told him to do. So sometimes we care too much about our feelings. We care too much about what people think about us, that we get into those moments where we just fight. And the truth is it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't bother you so much that you open yourself up to that. So in verse 2, you jealously want what others have, so you begin to see yourself as better than others. You scheme with envy and harm. You harm others to selfishly obtain what you crave. That's why you quarrel and fight. So again, he's talking about pride. Like, you want what you want, and you're willing to fight whoever for it. And that's why a lot of times fights happen. It says only by pride comes strife. So if you're in a moment of strife, if you're fighting, it's because somebody's pride got hurt. And that's what the Bible says. That's not me trying to come up with an explanation for it. That's what the Bible says, that if you're in strife, it's because of pride. So it's just not worth it. It says, you ask and you do not receive because you ask amiss that you may spend it on your own pleasures. Your motives are wrong. Your heart's not in the right place. Verse 4, adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. And what he's talking about here is what he says in verse 6. God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. God is not going to get on board with you if you're operating in pride. That's a good way to summarize that. Like, if you're going to make yourself a friend of the world and you're going to be all about yourself, because that's what the world teaches us, that it's all about us, it's all about doing the things that we want, then you can't expect that God's going to get on that train with you. But if you come from a place of humility, as we read in Proverbs, that's where you're going to find riches and life. It says, by humility and fear of the Lord comes riches and life. So if you want to have success in life, the first thing that you need to do is what Jesus said. You need to deny yourself. You need to deny going after only the things that you want and start giving God some attention and saying, hey, and it starts with little stuff. Hey, God, what do you want me to do today? It's that simple. It's you just getting your mind focused on Him. It's not that you should completely stop doing what you have planned, but just start doing things the way that He wants you to do them. And you'll see that shift in the way that you think even about your day is going to help you to walk in humility more than when you're not doing it. So in verse 6 it says, He gives more grace, therefore he says, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. Therefore submit to God. Number one, first thing you got to do is submit to Him. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Draw near to God and He will draw near to you. The first thing that you have to do is submit to God. You can't submit to God if you don't think there's something that you need to seek His advice on. And that comes back directly to pride. And I'm saying this firsthand as a guy. A lot of times you just want to do it your way. You don't want to wait for somebody to analyze the situation. You just want to get it done. And that's how we are as men a lot of times. We just want to do it our way and get it done. That's not submitting to God. The reason why you submit to somebody is because you feel like you need help, number one, and that they have something that's going to benefit you in listening to them. I'm not going to submit to somebody if I don't feel like there's something that they're going to do to help me in that situation, right? So for us to be able to submit to God, we've got to be able to say that. We've got to be in a place of humility. It can't just come like okay, I'm going to submit to God. No, you really have to believe in your heart that there's something that God, that you need His help with. And the only way you can realize that you need God's help every day is by truly being in a place of humility. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we always say we know what to do. And sometimes our kids say that. I know. I'm like, no, you don't know. Stop saying I know. Hear what we have to say first, and then you'll realize that what we're trying to do is just look out for you. And that's how God is. He just wants to look out for us. But a lot of times we're in the way. And we have to get ourselves out of the way so He can help us. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Pride, in James it says, in chapter 3, verse 16, for where envy and self-seeking exists, confusion and every evil thing is there. So when he's saying, resist the devil and he will flee from you, you got to connect those two and say, when I'm in strife and I'm in envy, when I'm envying people, when I'm arguing with people, every evil thing is at work in that situation. So that's why he's saying, resist the temptation to be offended. For me, obviously have to take my advice and be willing to resist yelling at kids for throwing balls on the court. Right? It's not easy. That's why I said it's not easy to do, but it's so important for us because that's the way that God's going to be able to help us. We first have to be willing to say, I'm going to get myself out of the way. I'm going to deny myself. And in doing that, I'm going to focus on God, and I'll be able to follow Jesus better because my focus is in the right place. And the last thing, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned into mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. That's a promise. That's where we're going to stop in verse 10. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. Being humble, there's a reward with that. It says that he's going to lift you up. He's going to put you in a place of success, but the first thing he wants you to do is to get out of the way so that he can work in your life. And the verse 8 is probably the one that stuck out the most to me. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. A lot of times we say we don't feel like there's no connection with God. But you have to draw near to him. Sometimes drawing near to something isn't just going to be like this instant, easy thing. It's going to take effort, So sometimes we have to make the effort to draw near, but the promise is that if you do that, if you draw near to God, if you put him as priority in your life, if you put your mind on him every day and washing dishes and going to work and whatever it is that you're doing, if you put your mind on him, the promise that he makes to you is that he's going to draw near to you. And the example that I think of that's probably like the closest or the best example that I can give is blind Bartimaeus. And the reason why I like that is, hold on, I'm just going to read it because it'll just be easier. Mark chapter 10, starting in verse 46. Now they came to Jericho. As he went out of Jericho with his disciples, a great multitude, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. So this guy's a beggar. He's sitting down begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out. And if you're reading in other translations, it says that he began to shout and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Then many from that great multitude that were following Jesus, many warned him to be quiet. And he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So just think about that in day-to-day life. There's going to be times where you're trying to draw near to God, like this guy was trying to draw near to Jesus. And people that call themselves Christians, because these people were following Jesus, are going to tell you to shut up. This guy didn't care that they said that to him. And a lot of times we would care. Like if someone tells you to be quiet, you probably might pipe down. But you know what? This guy was like, I'm drawing near to Jesus at all costs. You could tell me to shut up, I'm just going to scream louder. Why? Because he cared more about what Jesus could do for him than what people cared about him. Like he could care less if people thought he was a lunatic, thought that he was ridiculous, whatever. At the end of the day, all he wanted to was to draw near to Jesus because he knew that Jesus had the thing that he needed. And so when we read in James chapter 8, in James chapter 4, verse 8, talking about drawing near to God and he will draw near to you, this is the kind of approach that I think of taking. Like, are you willing to, at all costs, draw near to God? Be so like passionate about seeking after him that even when people who are supposed to be your circle, people who are supposed to be there to lift you up, they tell you to be quiet, are you willing to still go after him and not care what those people think? Because that's what this guy did. They told him to be quiet, and he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. Then they called the blind man, saying to him, be of good cheer, rise, he is calling you. Throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. So Jesus answered and said to him, what do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, Rabboni, that I may receive my sight. Lord, Master, that's what that means. Then Jesus said to him, go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. The things that you can't overlook in those situations is this guy had a job. His job was a beggar. And when Jesus came close, it says that he threw aside his garment. And he rose and came to Jesus. Jesus healed him. And the last thing it says about him is immediately he received his sight and he followed Jesus on the road. He left everything. He denied everything. To him, like, we may think of a beggar as being like, that's really like, that probably wasn't hard for him. Have you ever been stuck in a job or in a career where you felt like that was the only thing you could do? Like that was the only thing that could provide for you in your life? That was that guy. Begging was the only means that he knew to provide for himself. He left everything and followed after Jesus. And that's drawing near to God to like the most extreme way that I could try to give in terms of an example. People told him to shut up, he did it all the more. He didn't trust in his ability to provide for himself after that. He just followed after Jesus. He denied himself, because denying himself is he didn't care about what people thought about him. When you care what people think about you, that's pride. That's a good way to. If you care too much, if you care so much that you always want to have a good appearance in front of people, you care too much about your appearance. You care too much about yourself. This guy could care less. You tell me to shut up, I'm just going to scream more. I'm a beggar, and I'm getting right up in the crowd with you guys because I know that Jesus has something that I need. And once he got what he needed, he could care less about his former things. I'm coming after Jesus. I've tasted and seen that the Lord is good, and I'm following after him. That's how we have to be, man. If God has done something in our lives that's worth celebrating, that's worth giving him thanks for, then we should be going after him all the more. Because if we've tasted and seen God's goodness in our lives, there's more to it. That's not the end of it. There's not just this one little thing that he's done for us. There's so much more that he has for us that we just have to go after it, and we have to be like this guy at all costs. Tell me to shut up, and I'm going to scream even more. Tell me to get away, and I'm just going to press in even more. And so that's the best example that I can come up with in terms of how we should be drawn near to God at all costs. Who cares what people think about us? If we go after God, the promise there is that he's going to draw near to us. And that's the relationship that we should care about the most. So that's part 1 of chapter 4. We'll see you guys next week.